Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Today on CityCast Boise, Idaho lawmakers are at it again, pushing a bill that would require Bible readings in public schools. Meanwhile, 2 bills aim to gut Medicaid expansion despite voter support of the program. Plus, what's up with Boise Dems crossing party lines? The legislature keeps doing the most, so we're breaking it down. It's Monday, February 10th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. We're back again this week with our Capitol Chatter to let you know what's going on at the Capitol, what you need to be aware of, and what you can do about it. And joining me again is James Dawson, political reporter with Boise State Public Radio. Thank you so much for being here, Jimmy.
Happy to always be here, Lindsay.
So the first bill I want to jump into would require all public schools to read 10 verses, approximately 10 verses or whatever, of the King James Version of the Bible in every class, every school day. What's your take on this bill? What is this telling us about the legislature this session?
I mean, it wasn't a surprise. You had the Idaho Family Policy Center, which is the lobbying group that's been behind a lot of the recent and even all of the recent abortion legislation, anti-trans legislation, anti-drag show legislation. They're the ones pushing this. They made that public in September, I believe. So we've had a few months to kind of expect this. So yeah, I mean, it's saying like, hey, we want to keep pushing Idaho back toward this, vision of the 1950s, essentially, where, morality was maybe held in a much more uniform regard, whether or not that was actually true. But the perceived vision of that to really get into society and permeate society and try to bring us back to that time. I think that that's probably a fair description of what they're trying to achieve with this. That is the goal of this legislation.
Yeah, and the way they're trying to get around the First Amendment, I think, is, I'm going to say sneaky. But so you can opt out. It's not an opt-in. Like, just so everyone's aware, like in the school district my children go to, I have to opt in for like sex ed, for talking about puberty. So I have to send a note in that says, yes, I would like my children to know how their bodies work. But so this is the opposite, where I would have to opt out and be like, no, thank you about pushing religion in school. And then teachers who feel this goes against their conscience, against, what they believe, their deeply held beliefs, they could skip out on it. But they want to enforce this through lawsuits. So if a member of the public feels like this isn't happening or isn't happening to the specifications that they want, they can sue the school, and then a judge would order the school to comply. And that's something we've seen with a lot of these laws, is their constitutionality is shaky at best, likely unconstitutional. And so they want them to be enforced by civil lawsuits. And that seems to be the new enforcement method. And, is that holding true with a lot of these similar type of bills this session?
Well, my reading of it is that they would only be able to get an injunction. They wouldn't be able to actually get damages. So in that way, it wouldn't be similar to, say, some of the abortion legislation we've seen in the past couple of years with those civil causes of action. The library bill, I guess, would be another example of that. That's certainly been a trend. And we've seen some of that this year with other bills that have been introduced. But I don't think that necessarily applies to this piece of legislation.
And I'd just like to note that this bill was brought by Representative Jordan Redmond from Coeur d'Alene. He's been quieter in years past. So this has been interesting, an interesting turn of events.
Yeah, I mean, he's very active, especially in the healthcare arena, which we'll talk about a little bit later, since he's sponsoring one of the bills to, that would essentially repeal Medicaid expansion. Something else that I think people need to kind of keep in mind when we're talking about Bible reading in schools is that this was already outlawed by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1963, saying it violated the First Amendment. And basically, the Idaho Family Policy Center is saying, yeah, okay, well, let's try again. I mean, this has the smell of a Supreme Court test case if I've ever smelled one. They specifically put in the legislative intent language, which is like a fancy word of saying this is what we believe. These are statements that we believe. They specifically cite, the case from Washington State a few years ago where the football coach got fired for praying with his football team, right? Which was then overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court and said that no, football coaches can totally do that. And so they want to take that path. And if this passes, then I absolutely see it just going up in the courts.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that is where they want to go with this. The schools have been preemptively removing books that feature gay characters or, even things about like developing bodies and things like that. But there are parts of the Bible that are significantly more mature than anything that was in my children's elementary school library. And the teachers are supposed to be reading these without comment. So like, ends the King James Version of the Bible. That's what I was raised on. There are some unique, spicy, we'll say spicy passages that these children are going to be read when the Idaho Family Policy Center, just last session, just a few sessions ago, was like, we don't want inappropriate materials in front of children. So, it seems like that's not actually a deal breaker for them.
Well, I think that they would say that, hey, this is the Bible. This is the one book that we agree that everyone should read. And, it's the word of God. It's the literal word of God to them and their followers. And so they see nothing wrong with it because those points have been brought up in committee too, where you have someone reading, passages about rape or incest or ejaculation, like all of these things in the Bible. And the committee initially, because they're read without saying it's the Bible first. And they're like, oh my God, what is this? And then they're like, this is the Bible. And they're like, and then they get a little angry, because they see that as a diss on their religion.
Okay, so I'm really curious. What do you think is the likelihood that this passes? Because 3 Republicans and the 2 Democrats on the House committee were not in favor of this. And, Representative Jack Nelson from Jerome particularly spoke out and said, I don't want to be promoting religion. I don't want to pick one religion over the other. Like, I'm not in favor of advancing this.
Yeah, totally. I think that it will be a difficult thing for the committee to pass. Just kind of looking at the makeup of it, you certainly have some far-right lawmakers there, especially some new ones, but I don't think it's insurmountable. It seems like it could certainly get to the House floor. There are 14 members on that committee. If you had 4, including 2 Democrats saying that they're not down with it, there's still plenty more wiggle room right there. The bigger question to me is, is it going to pass the Senate, or at least pass the Senate committee, which is much more of a different landscape than, say, the Senate floor or the House floor.
Okay, so this is still at the House Education Committee, right, Jimmy? I just want to give people an idea, like, where is this at in the process? What's next?
Totally. Yep. Just got introduced. Still waiting on a public hearing in that committee. I haven't seen it appear on, the agendas, as of the time we're recording this, but certainly keep your eyes on the House Education Committee if this is something you feel strongly about.
That committee hearing is going to be definitely one to tune into for sure.
It's going to be lit. I mean, it's going to last hours, I would imagine. They do have, since it's a morning committee, they can't take too much time, but it's going to go right up to floor session for sure.
This episode is brought to you by Abercrombie. There's nothing better than the perfect jean and going out top combo. or an outfit that perfectly matches your plans. Abercrombie's relaxed jean goes with every occasion. Date nights with something lace or daytime with a cozy sweater. And their barrel jean will surprise you. It's the trend that will become a staple in your wardrobe. Abercrombie denim comes in tons of rises, fits, and washes. Find your perfect pair online or in store.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Okay, now we're going to jump into our segment that is a variation on Date, Marry, Kill, where we talk about things that have happened in the legislature, bills or things people have said that were off the wall or slightly unhinged or, just unexpected, and decide which ones we would have absolutely pass, just it passes, that's it. We leave it up to the legislators, and one that we would instantly kill, it goes away. If we had that power, wouldn't that be great? Okay, so Jimmy has compiled a list for me. Last week's was really tricky. I feel like this week's will be similarly tricky. So here we go.
All right, Lindsay. So starting off strong for you, since we've maybe texted about this and emailed about this a little bit, you had some surprising votes from Democrats who sided with Republicans on a couple issues. You had two Democrats, Representatives Todd Achilles and Sonia Galaviz, vote for the tax cuts in the House, on the House floor. Then you had Senator Carrie Semmelroth vote to advance a school, private school subsidy bill. She said that she did it because she wanted the $30 million that was in there for special education. She's a special education teacher. And then you had Representative Megan Egbert also vote to introduce something in the House Health and Welfare Committee, which was kind of surprising with, Medicaid expansion. So that's all encompassed into one thing. Then earlier, you also had a woman, Leslie Manukian from Sun Valley, who runs an anti-vaxxer organization, saying that using soap and washing your hands is performative. Then you also had a bill from Senator Brandon Shippey that would essentially enshrine fetal personhood into Idaho law, meaning that, abortion is murder, assaults on a pregnant woman means you get an extra charge for attacking another human life. So those are your three. How are you feeling? Is every week just going to be like a lengthy, angsty sigh?
Maybe. I need to clear that energy. God, I feel like the easiest one. It's still painful, but the easiest one is that we'll just leave it up to the legislature, is the performative hand washing. And honestly, since this happened, I cannot use public restrooms because are we washing our hands? So recent from a pandemic, and we're going to call hand washing performative.
Look, Lindsay,
as a nurse, I want to cry.
I gotta tell you, using the men's bathroom at the Capitol, sure, okay, so I have OCD. I've had OCD since I was 8, but I think that it's very important for people to wash their hands after they go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And it is shocking to me how few people, when I go in there, wash their hands after going to the bathroom.
Okay.
What about the women's bathroom? Do you notice anyone not washing their hands?
I feel like people do, but I have been in the stall and somebody gets out before me and then I hear just the littlest on, off, and I'm like, oh, I didn't do anything. That didn't do anything. So anyway, that one is I'm going to leave it up to the legislature.
Okay, what about the other two?
Actually, no, I got to change my mind. I'm making performative hand washing the pass because just whatever. Let you guys get sick. If you guys are going to not wash your hands, just get sick. I can't do the other ones. It's too hard. Okay, I have so many feelings about how Dems voted this week. If we have Dems voting like Republicans, then, what's the point? The power the Dems have right now is to use their votes to oppose what is happening, to take a stand. So if they're not doing that, what are they doing? Like, what are they doing? But then fetal personhood, I just morally can never allow that to fly at all. So I am going to kill fetal personhood because from being a nurse, from being a human, from being someone who's been pregnant, it's the most idiotic legislation ever.
Yeah, and we should say that Senator Jim Guthrie, chair of Senate State Affairs, said that bill was not going to get a public hearing. He just was going to have it introduced for people to talk about. And we're talking about it.
Yeah, so I'm going to also kill it because no, we just can't even, we should not be entertaining that. That would be like if I wanted a bill about why unicorns should be allowed to be citizens. We shouldn't even be entertaining that. It is beyond ridiculous at this point. So with the Dem votes, like, is it worse to be slapped or knocked out? I don't want either. We could have just voted no for both. But if they're going to do this, then you reap what you sow. I'm like, we shouldn't have to hold their hands through this process.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Okay, speaking of, is the legislature listening, which is a conversation we always have. There have been 2 bills now introduced that would dismantle or fully repeal Medicaid expansion, which is something Idaho voters strongly supported and strongly voted for with a ballot initiative.
Yeah, the first one is really simple. It's a straight up repeal of Medicaid expansion introduced by Representative John Vanderwoude. He's backed similar sorts of bills, for years, ever since Medicaid expansion first passed, has wanted to repeal that for a very long time now. That is one. The second one is from Representative Jordan Redmond from Coeur d'Alene. And this one is much more complex and difficult to understand because it has just tons of conditions that would be put upon Medicaid expansion if it were to pass. So we're talking work requirements, which, we saw pass a few years ago, and that waiver application just basically died in a desk drawer at Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services. Mm-hmm. You also have in there like a lifetime cap on how long you can be on Medicaid expansion. It would be 3 years under the bill. You also would have a cap of, maximum 50,000-ish people. Right now, just for context, there are about 90,000 people on Medicaid expansion, and a whole bunch of other different requirements, including that the federal government couldn't drop its share from 90% of the cost of the entire program any lower than that, which is very difficult for me to see being approved by the federal government,
especially with this administration.
Exactly, because we've heard talk about that, where they want to save some money, drop the federal share of this down to 70%, make it like the same as a regular Medicaid 70-30 split, right? And so all of those conditions, plus a bunch that I didn't even talk about, would have to be met by next July. And if that doesn't happen, then Medicaid expansion goes away completely. And so you had, House Minority Leader Alana Rubel say, yeah, okay, well, that's basically the death of Medicaid expansion if it passes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, it has more of these little like points of like, well, meet this and meet this and meet this. But essentially it would be a repeal for it as we know it and as it's functioned in this state since 2018, 2019. So what does it feel like when we're looking at these 2 bills or maybe this most recent one specifically that has all these qualifications for Medicaid expansion? What is the feeling at the legislature about it? How's it being received by maybe the more moderate Republicans? what's kind of the vibe check on this?
Yeah, I mean, you have some of the more moderate Republicans being like, yeah, I Medicaid expansion is something that I want to watch closely. I don't like how much money we're spending on it necessarily. Some of them think that, but there have been great benefits. The state is saving money in Department of Corrections, for example, or not having to fund this catastrophic health fund that we used to have, for example, that, by the way, would not be put back into place for either of these two bills. So that would just leave all these 90,000 people high and dry. So in that respect, they're very concerned about messing with something without putting a backstop in. They also, for example, are like, why don't we, if we're going to do this, why don't we just repeal it? Which is why Jordan Redmond introduced this bill last year, didn't go anywhere. Same with Medicaid expansion repeal. That's been tried in the past, didn't even get out of committee. So I think that there is sort of an understanding that, hey, this passed by almost 62% of the vote back in 2018, and we probably shouldn't mess with it, or it's just going to be a massive headache that we'd have to come back and fix if we do that.
Well, and I don't think, surely not the legislators, but I don't think people in general know. I'm a nurse. I've worked in the ER. If we are not paying for Medicaid expansion, those costs don't just go away. That doesn't just stop being an expense. People don't just stop not looking for healthcare, but they do things like misuse the ER. And when I say that, a lot of times people think like, oh, well, they're just using it willy-nilly because they have to. Because they aren't getting preventative care. They aren't getting the care that they need. Like when I was in the ER, we would have patients who'd come in who were college kids and this was before Medicaid expansion, and they would come in because they'd run out of insulin and they didn't have insurance, and they're just trying to make it work month to month. So they'd come in crazy sick, needing insulin. And we'd give them insulin and, try to give them a little bit, and we're going to see you in 3 weeks. And that's not good for them. That's not safe for them. But people don't stop needing healthcare because you stop paying for it. You will pay for it in other ways. They're going to go to the ER, and the local hospitals aren't just going to eat that cost. They pass that cost on to the public. You are going to pay for that with your health insurance. You're going to pay for that with all of these different things. So if we're just trying to get rid of Medicaid expansion to quote unquote save money, that's not how it works. That's not how reality works. And so this isn't something that if we just cancel Medicaid expansion, it goes away. That's not how this works.
And I think that that's the exact argument that Democrats have been making ever since Medicaid expansion passed, and they've tried to repeal it or curtail it.
So, Jimmy, what is the next step with either of these bills? Or is there one that seems more likely to pass, or one where people can get prepared to give testimony or contact their legislator?
Oof. I mean, it's difficult to predict these things, and I don't like to. I would think that maybe the one with conditions might be a better sell. Representative Redmond was saying he has confidence that the Trump administration would sign off on all of those waivers that are necessary for those guardrails to sort of function. I don't know if people buy that on the committee necessarily. It's a very close vote from public statements that I've seen of different legislators, or like the sort of pledge to support the Republican Party platform, which is essentially repealing the Affordable Care Act, which would repeal Medicaid expansion.
And what committee are these both in, just to clarify for people?
Yeah, they're both in the House Health and Welfare Committee. They could get public hearings this week. We still need the public hearing for both of them. So again, keep an eye on those agendas. But legislators always take emails and phone calls throughout the session, even if something might not appear for a couple more weeks.
Well, Jimmy, this was another wild week in the legislature with it seems like the hits just keep coming. So thank you so much for taking the time to break them down and have another really, really difficult round of date, marry, kill choices. You really are. You're really making that tricky for me. That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, make sure and tell a friend about us so they can keep up with the legislature too. We'll be back tomorrow morning to talk with the ex-MAGA granny who's refusing Trump's pardon. You won't want to miss it.